On a rainy Saturday afternoon, Liam stepped into a second-hand bookstore tucked away in one of the city's old streets, seeking shelter from the downpour. A tiny bell above the door chimed with a delicate sound, just loud enough to announce his presence. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of dust, stories long-lived, and a silence that seemed to belong to time itself. He paused in front of a random shelf and reached for an old, hardcover novel. As he opened the book, something slipped from between its pages and floated gently to the ground. Bending down, he picked it up. A slightly yellowed photograph with curled edges. In it, two young men sat on a bench, smiling. Side by side, eyes locked, captured in the purest and most peaceful moment of loving someone. Liam froze for a moment. The smile of a stranger echoed in his chest in a way he couldn't explain. On the back of the photo, a simple note was written. June. For Owen, Liam didn't know it yet, but that faded piece of paper in his hand was the beginning of a journey that would change the direction of his life. As Liam stepped out of the bookstore, he was still staring at the photograph in his hand. The rain had stopped, and the streets shimmered with reflections of the pale sky on the wet pavement. Before placing the photo into his wallet, he turned it over one more time. June. For Owen. Just a name. And a face. Back home, the unease inside him grew. He spent hours browsing old photographs online, digging through local archives, flipping through graduation yearbooks from decades ago. The more his searches turned up empty, the more valuable the small clue he held became. But one detail hadn't escaped his notice. In the bottom left corner of the photo, barely visible, was a faded logo. Camden Park, 1994. Liam decided he would go there the next morning. Camden Park was still there, but time had clearly passed through it too. The benches were worn, the signs faded. When Liam found the bench from the photo, his heart began to race. It was really the same place. And as he sat down, an elderly man approached. "Young man, I've seen this bench for years, but I've never seen you sitting on it before," he said kindly. Liam hesitated, then held out the photograph. "I found this picture tucked in a book. Do you recognize these men, especially Owen?" The old man adjusted his glasses and stared at the photo for a moment. Silence. Then a glimmer of an old memory softened his face. Owen. How could I not remember? But he's part of the past now, son. They used to come here often. Then one day, Owen just disappeared. The other one, Daniel. He was a good kid. Liam's curiosity had reached a point of no return. Before him wasn't just a faded photograph. It was the buried pages of someone else's story. And he knew he had to follow it, even if it meant going all the way to the end. After what the old man had told him, Liam included the name Daniel in his search. Old newspaper clippings, digital yearbooks, and finally, a match. A school theater program from 1994. Inside it, two smiling young men, Daniel Reynolds and Owen Hale. The faces were undoubtedly the same as in the photograph. Further digging revealed that Owen had once worked as a theater instructor. But after that, it was as if a curtain had been drawn over his life. No trace on social media, no recent records. Every road led back to one address from years ago. A small coastal town, Ashport. Liam packed his bag without much thought and set off. Ashport was a peaceful town shaded by gray clouds. The scent of the sea lingered in the air. Following a clue from an old letter, Liam stood in front of a small book cafe. When he stepped inside, the first thing that caught his eye was a black and white photo hanging on the wall. Owen in his youth, this time on stage with Daniel. "Can I help you?" asked a calm voice from behind. A middle-aged man stood there, quiet and observant. His eyes were fixed intently on Liam. Liam took a deep breath. "I had to find you. You're Owen, aren't you?" The man paused. His eyes seemed to drift away for a moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "No one has said that name to me in a very long time." Owen invited Liam inside. The shelves were filled with old books and dust-covered memories. A little tea, a little silence. Then Owen spoke. That photo. It went missing years ago. Daniel took it. That summer we belonged to each other. But the world back then didn't leave room for loves like ours. His eyes glistened. Daniel, he got sick. And I left everything behind. I hid. Because nothing made sense without him. Since then, all I've done is protect the memories we shared. Liam reached into his pocket and placed the photo on the table. Maybe this memory brought you back to life again. Because sometimes the past isn't just pain. It can be a bridge. Owen sat silently for a long time. Then, gently, he picked up the photo, tracing it with his fingertips. "Let me show you something," he said. They climbed to the upper floor. Owen's room was old but carefully preserved. In one corner sat a box. Inside were letters written to Daniel, old theater tickets, and more photographs. Each one a breath from the past. Owen handed Liam one of the letters he'd written to Daniel but never sent. The yellowed paper was dog-eared at the corners, yet the ink was still vibrant. "Dear Daniel, today I saw you in a dream. We were on stage. There was no audience, yet you still smiled. Perhaps this letter will never reach you. Perhaps I am only talking to myself. But I still love you, despite time, despite your absence." As Liam read the words in silence, he noticed Owen's hands trembling. Time may have tried to erase everything, but some feelings remain unchanged, as vivid as the first day. "So what now?" Liam asked without looking away from Owen. "What will you do?" Owen bowed his head and drew a deep breath. Then he looked back at Liam. "I don't know, but maybe. This time I won't leave a letter unfinished." Before leaving Ashport, Liam walked with Owen to the shoreline one last morning. They carried a box filled with letters Owen had written to Daniel but never mailed. Owen placed the box gently in the water. As the letters drifted away on the waves, his face held a strange mixture of pain and peace. "I won't forget him," he said, "but I don't have to keep living in the past." Liam smiled at him. Sometimes a photograph is more than a memory. It's a new beginning. On his way back to the train station, Liam looked once more at the photograph he still carried. It no longer belonged only to Owen's past. It had become part of his own journey, too. Months later, Liam opened his own little book cafe. Hanging next to the door was a framed photograph. Two men, smiling together. Beneath it, a small note read, "Sometimes a single moment tells more than a lifetime." Now, that photograph represented far more than the past, because every story lives on forever. Once it touches another heart.